Hey everyone, today we are going to be making this pair of fringe earrings with brick stitch. For this project I am going to be using 11/aught Miyuki rocaille beads. These are from a bead mix called Metallic Rain that I got from Barrel of Beads. This is not sponsored, I just really like doing business with them, so go ahead and check them out. We are also going to need a set of French hook ear wires, and we'll need 2 wire guards. I'm using black polyester thread that's been pre-conditioned with beeswax. I have a little video on how I go about doing that linked in the description box. I have about 2 arms length worth of thread threaded into my big eye needle. We're also going to need a nice sharp pair of scissors and a pair of needle nose pliers. I'm going to pick up 2 beads and slide them down towards the bottom of my thread. And then I'm going to tie them together with an overhand knot, leaving a couple inches for my tail. I'm then going to double knot to make sure they don't come apart. I have the knot on top of my pair of beads, and I'm going to go down through the left bead with my needle. I also want to thread my tail down through the right bead, so I'm going to show you my little trick that I have for not having to take my bead off of the thread or get a second needle. So I take my working needle and I go up through the bead in the opposite direction that I want the thread to go, but I only pull the needle halfway through, then I thread my tail through that needle and pull it back out. So there I have taken care of my tail thread without having to rethread my needle or get another needle. Now I have both threads coming out of the bottom of my pair of beads. So I'm going to pick up another bead and go down through the bead on the left. We're going to ladder stitch this on so that I'm going to go back up through the bead that I just put on to get ready to put on our next bead. And you can see if you don't pinch your beads together when you pull your thread, it'll pull the bead away from your work. So I will typically pinch the beads together before I pull so they stay nice and tight together. I will ladder stitch on another bead. And you can see every time I ladder stitch on a new bead, I pinch the beads really well before I pull my thread nice and tight. Because you really want to make sure that this ladder stitch is tight so that your earring doesn't want to try and curl up on itself later on. And we're going to keep stitching on beads one by one until we have 9 beads stitched together. And now we're going to start working on our brick stitch. And I like to turn my piece around so that the tail's coming out of the left side, and that means I'm working my first row of brick stitch from right to left. So for my first brick stitch, I'm going to pick up 2 beads, and then I'm going to thread my needle under the second thread bridge. I'm going to pull those nice and tight, and then I'm going to go back up through the bead on the left. And since you can see the bead on the right does not want to lay down, we're going to go back down through that bead, and then up through the left bead again. And now when we pull it nice and tight, both of our beads will be laying down flat. And for our second brick stitch, we're going to pick up just 1 bead and then go through the very next thread bridge. And then I'm going to thread right back up through this bead that I just put on. You want to make sure that you continue to make these brick stitches nice and tight so that your earring will lay flat when you're finished with it. And we're just going to continue with the brick stitch all the way across until we get to the last thread bridge. So that means 1 bead over every thread bridge until we have 8 beads across. And now that we've reached the end of the row, it's time to go the other direction for our 3rd row. And just like the start of the last row, I'm going to pick up 2 beads and I'm going to put my thread through the second thread bridge. Then back up through the right bead, down through the left bead, and up through the right bead again. And then continue with a single brick stitch going across the rest of the row from left to right. And we're going to keep zigzagging our way back and forth through the rows until we get to the very last row. Make sure to keep those brick stitches nice and tight the whole way through. Our last row is only going to have 2 beads on it. So we pick up 2 beads into the second thread bridge, back up through the left bead, down through the right bead, and up through the left bead again. And now we can go ahead and put on our wire guard. So we're going to go up through the left leg of the wire guard and then down through the right leg. And then we're going to go in through that right hand bead on the top row. Make sure that your thread is nestled nicely inside the wire guard and it's not popping out anywhere. And then I'm going to go around my wire guard a second time just to make sure everything's nice and secure. Then I'm going to go down through the rightmost bead of all my rows. And now we're ready to start putting on our fringe. So I'm going to pick up 30 beads and then I'm going to pull them all the way down. Then we're going to skip over the last bead that we put on and go back up through the other 29 beads. And I like to pick my earring up by the fringe that I'm working on so that gravity can pull all the beads together for me. And you want to make sure that you don't pull these fringes too tight so they'll be nice and flowy. You can see that if I pull it too tight, it's like stiff and sad and barely moves. So you want to have just enough slack to get that nice movement. So I'm going to go up through that bottom right corner bead of my triangle. And I'm going to go down through the bead to the left of that. And that will set me up to be able to put on my second fringe. Each fringe is going to increase by 2 beads until we get to the center, so that means this fringe is going to have 32 beads on it. And each time I pull beads down for a new fringe, I like to lay them up next to each other so that I can make sure they're lining up where they need to. Because if you've miscounted and your fringe is a little too short or too long, it's so much easier to fix it before you go back up through all the beads again. I'm going to pinch that end bead of the fringe really well so that when I pull my thread, the entire length of the thread can cinch up nicely. I'm going to go up the bead above my fringe and then down the bead to the left of that. We're ready to put on another fringe just like the last one, and this one's going to have 34 beads on it. And I'm doing my length check to make sure everything's lining up. And then I'm going to sew back through. We're going to keep making our fringes the same way. The next one's going to have 36 beads on it. Make sure they're not too tight and they're giving you some good movement. The next fringe will have 38 beads on it. And since that was our middle fringe, we're going to start decreasing the number of beads now. So the next fringe will have 36 beads, 34 beads, 32 beads, and back down to 30 beads. And once we've sewn back up through our last fringe, our working thread will be in the same place that our tail thread is. So I'm going to give one last good check for movement. And then I'm not going to be going back up through the bead that's in the brick stitch area. I'm just going to go straight to tying the working thread and tail thread together. So I'm going to tie a very loose overhand knot to make sure that I don't tighten up my fringes on accident. I'm going to do a second very loose knot. And then I'm going to do a third really tight knot to keep everything nice and secure together. And that is what our earring is going to look like. So all we have to do now is work both of our ends back through this last fringe. So I'm going to give it a snippety snip. And another snippety snip. And now that the earring is all tied off, we're ready to put it on our French hook. So I'm going to open up the loop with my pliers, and then I'm going to slide my wire guard on there and close it back up. And that's it. There we have our cute little dangly fringe earring. You just got to do that process one more time to get its mate, and then you're all ready to go. Keep your eyes peeled for next week, where I will be teaching you how to do this matching fringe necklace. And now that you know how to make these single brick stitch fringe earrings, if you want to start designing your own fringe earring patterns, I have a handy dandy little grid that's made especially for single brick stitch fringe earrings. You can see the top half of the grid has the brick stitch layout, and the bottom half of the grid has the fringe layout. So I have that available in my Etsy shop, and I'll put a link in the description for you. Or you can save 30% by getting the bundle, which has all 5 fringe earring grids. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you would like to see more like it, please throw me a subscribe, like it if you're feeling frisky, and leave a comment if you have something to say. Okay, bye!